Hello and welcome to the final Property Roundup show here on iPropertyRadio with myself, Katie Tallon. It is our final show of the year, final show of 2024. And while it's our final show of this year, it's our first Property Roundup show to record in our new studios in the heart of Connemara. And I'm so delighted to be joined by returning guest to the show, Sean Corbett, Director of Mortgages with SYS Mortgages, who was one of our early guests back almost 6 years ago down in our Dublin South FM studios. So
absolutely,
thank you for taking the time and making the trek today, Sean. It's great to see you again. And delighted that you're the first Property Roundup guest on the sofa.
Super.
So you're going to tell us all about the last time we spoke about mortgages. You know, we were talking a lot about maybe the market uncertainty because we were still in such, as we are now, crunched supply, that there was, I suppose, a sense of desperation among buyers. Yeah. But last week, there was a news report saying that approval for first-time buyers, mortgage approval for first-time buyers, at a record high. So what's the story behind that figure? Or can everybody who gets approval actually find a home?
And that's the issue. Typically out there, AIB stats, for instance, out of every 10 applications they do for a first-time buyer, they expect 4 of them to complete. So there'll be 6 people who, although they've got approval, they don't go anywhere. Personal experience within my own company is about 7 out of 10 people actually who come to me for a mortgage would draw down a mortgage. So yes, there's an all-time high out there of people looking for approval. But it's the old story, isn't it? Not enough supply, and I'm still finding that. And all I can say is thank goodness for new builds, because they are a very popular choice now for people. And thank God there is some construction going on in the country.
Yeah, well, let's just unpack those figures initially for a moment. There, in terms of the AIB figures, you know, when you hear 4 out of 10. Your first thought might go to, well, are these people who are seeking approval with a number of different lenders and therefore choosing who they want to go to? But with the mortgage broker, even with that figure rising to 7 out of 10, does that mean that 3 out of 10 people who are approved end up not buying a home?
Yeah, 100%. And I'll give you an example. I had a doctor recently looking in Dunleary, had been looking there for some time, and he contacted me to say, look, I'm not going to do anything for a couple of years. I can't find a property and I'm sick of bidding on properties. So he didn't go ahead. I've got another couple in Dublin who they're on their, I think this is going to be their 60th property they're viewing, and they still haven't managed. They've been outbid every time, or they've found faults with the property. And will they ever draw down the mortgage? I don't know. So it's it literally is down to supply and people's preference. Most people do get approved. Some people don't get approved because of their credit files and so on, but they wouldn't get to an approval stage. So yeah, it literally is. It's not easy to get a mortgage, but it's easier than finding a property. So that's the real hard work. Is I can get your approval, but then you've got the hard job of finding a property.
That's a real symptom of the dysfunction in the marketplace at the moment. And I'm just thinking for most of those people, they're probably paying equivalent to a mortgage payment, possibly more on rent.
Oh, a lot more. Most people now are paying double what they're paying on a rent compared to if you had a mortgage to the same value or the same type of property, even less than that. But I am seeing a lot of people do seem to be moving back home. And I get that a lot from single applicants and couples who have been living with their parents again. Yeah. So it's and they're in a fortunate position because they're not paying rent. They're managing to up their deposit and so on. But the rent trap it's sky high. There's a property even in Limerick, 4-bed detached house. It's been in the papers in a place called Raheen near the industrial estates, a new build, and it's €4,500 a month.
That particular property hit the headlines.
Absolutely.
Because the commentary was almost celebrating this wonderful house had come to the market. And the market, and by the market, I'm saying also our audience on Facebook, when we shared that particular story, they were annoyed, they were outraged, because again, anything like this is seen as symptomatic of the huge problems in our property market, and most of those come down to supply. But it's just interesting for me to see how these manifest through the mortgage market and say mortgage behaviours. But when we look at the mortgage market, I think an awful lot of the commentary is around first-time buyers. But what other activity is happening? People trading up or down, or just switching mortgages full stop?
The switcher market has definitely picked up compared to the first half of 2024. It's certainly picked up in the last quarter of 2024, simply because rates have gotten a lot better out there and people are becoming more educated now. But the figure is, believe it or not, at the end of 2024, there'll be 80,000 people who could be eligible to switch from their existing provider to potentially a new provider. So there is that business out there. There is subsequent buyers, so people trading up who aren't switching to renovate. They're looking for a bigger property. And you've got, albeit very, the market has shrunk, your buy-to-let market, i.e. people buying a property out to let it out. And that market has shrunk a lot more than any other market in 2024.
Well, let's break those down. So say the switchers, because I remember years ago, now I'm talking kind of 15, 16, 17 years ago, it was always said that Irish people tend not to shop around. You know, back then we didn't change homes as often. You know, in the UK, I think the turnover of property was every 7 years. For us, it was maybe every 10. People tended to have one forever home. They tended not to be great at switching any utilities or mortgages. Has there been a whole culture change?
No, there's still not enough people switching. I'd put a guesstimate on it. I'd say only about 24 to 25% of the potential switcher market actually look at switching. The pillar banks still have the likes of Bank of Ireland, AIB, PTSB. They have the lion's share of the market when people take out mortgages, first of all, and then and the difference in their rates between those three banks is very little. But there are things now like green rates. So anybody who bought a new build property in the last 5 years, they would benefit from a green rate that weren't around when they would have first taken out their mortgage. So there is reasons now to switch, and people are looking at it, but a lot of people are switching now because they want to raise equity on their property. I'm seeing a lot of marital or partnership breakups where one person wants to retain the property and buy out the other person. I've got one going on up the country at the moment where the poor guy, he thought he would have to sell the property. I managed to get him a mortgage with one of the new lenders, New Money, and he's going to keep the family home. And it would have been a disaster for him. He'd have been back in the rent trap. So now he's bought out his ex-partner and off he goes. So people are doing that. People can even raise money for fertility treatment, putting their kids through college. So people are switching for various different reasons. So you can do it.
That's a real kind of, that's such a broad look at the human activity that goes on behind the mortgages. Why, you know, people's decisions to raise money. I'd never considered people actually refinancing homes to pay for fertility treatment, which actually is a symptom of our broken healthcare system and health insurance system. But let's not. That's for another show on another day.
Sure.
But actually, what does it tell us then about the in terms of switching for the sake of switching? Do many people just do it to save money? Is there much to be saved?
It depends on. Look, a good broker would always look at what you can get from your existing provider and look at what's out there in the marketplace. But a very good example, a couple who are switching from Finance Ireland. Finance Ireland were particularly badly hit when rates went up. The ECB raised their rates and Finance Ireland rates are now very poor. So they came off a good fixed rate with Finance Ireland. They were paying €960 per month. Their rate went up to €1,500 per month. And there was a good reason for them to switch to Bank of Ireland because now they're paying €1,000 a month. Yes, it has gone up €40, but it certainly hasn't gone up 6,000 a year.
That's a huge differential there.
So take some free advice and contact a broker. And a good broker will have to give you best advice. If you're best staying with Bank of Ireland, they'll tell you stay with Bank of Ireland, because there are costs involved in switching, of course. You've got solicitors' costs and you've got valuation. But we'd always look at getting you a cashback deal. So at least you're covering your costs, so it doesn't cost you anything to switch apart from a bit of time.
Yeah. Okay. That's some good advice for people maybe who are, you know, the end of year, the start of a new year. It's always a good time to sit back, reflect on the family finances, the structures, and I think that maybe people have an aspiration to do this and then they just put it on the long finger because they think it's too much paperwork.
Absolutely.
So no, that's an interesting one. I want to talk about buy-to-let mortgages.
Yes.
Well, first of all, does such a thing exist anymore?
Certainly does. From the mainland Bank of Ireland, you have to go direct for a buy-to-let mortgage. You can't go through a broker. PTSB, probably the best rates in the market for a buy-to-let. ICS mortgages are back in the market for buy-to-lets.
Right.
But the big issue at the moment, because rates and buy-to-let rates typically are higher than your first-time buyer rates, and first-time buyers can't get a buy-to-let mortgage, believe it or not. You have to be a subsequent, or you have to have a house to live in. But it's getting the rental yield to cover the mortgage is the trick, because every buy-to-let mortgage has to be stress tested. So firstly, i.e. they'll take 75% of the rent that you would achieve, and then they'll stress test it by 2% on top of the normal rate. So you can imagine you're looking at a yield of almost 10% to qualify for a mortgage on a buy-to-let now.
See, I would have thought, though, that would have been the easiest box to tick off, given the high rents, and that you'd be a new landlord entering the market with a new property.
Yeah, it depends on whereabouts in the country. Yeah, typically you'd see in Dublin the nice period buildings and that, because the rents seem high in Dublin, but compared to the value of the property and what you put down, the rent doesn't always cover the mortgage. So it's especially the stress test nonsense that they do, and the rental yield. They'll only take 75% of the rental yield because of rent voids in a market where there isn't enough rental properties. So the buy-to-let market it's turned into a cash market again.
Yeah.
It's people are buying them for cash and renting them out.
But are they buying them for cash? And I don't know if you'd have a perspective on this, but only in the last few days, the RTB, while marking its 20th anniversary, released a tranche of data that has everybody in the market scratching their head. The figures just don't make sense.
Yeah.
They're talking about new landlords coming into the market, and we don't know where those figures are coming from. I think the figures they had were that new landlords entering the market coming in at a rate of, up 5%. And that just doesn't tally with any of the other data that any of the agents are collecting, the people who are selling properties, the people who are buying properties. They're all reporting consistent data, which is landlords exiting.
Absolutely.
And very few coming in to take their place. And there's been some huge numbers, even by the housing department's own figures, where literally over a 2 to 3 year period, there was a change of about 70,000 in the number of landlords that they were recording. So do we have an issue with reporting, or do we have an issue with the buy-to-let sector, that landlords are not attracted to it?
Landlords certainly aren't attracted to the sector by taking out a mortgage. We get a lot of inquiries, but nobody follows it through, because once you go through the figures, people are horrified the way a lender would actually, the qualifying criteria to get a buy-to-let mortgage. Now, you had a big exodus because people were afraid of a change in government, clearly. That might change, because it looks like we're back to the same old scenario we had for the last 4.5, 5 years that we're going to have now for the next 5 years. So that might bring a bit of stability into the market, and maybe the buy-to-let market will pick up again.
Do you think there was a fear? So if you and I were having this conversation 12 months ago, there was almost an expectation that Sinn Féin was going to be the leader in government.
Would feature, yep.
And now we know that that's not the case. So while we don't know exactly what shape our next government will take, we know that it's going to be Fianna Fáil led, with Fine Gael, and most likely supported by independents.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that brings a certain degree of, I don't want to say the status quo, but that certainty. Yeah. Do you think the threat that was not the government we were going to have was keeping people out of the market?
Yeah, it's the fear, isn't it, of am I going to have my rental property? Is my rent going to be frozen forever? And is my tenant going to have so many rights that if they decide not to pay me, I'll never get them out? And you would have a bit of sympathy for some landlords, the one-off properties, that if they're not able to pay their mortgage to ICS, they'll lose their property, and they might not have another income that they can shore up rent that's not been paid and so on. But it was great to see landlords exiting the market, because it did boost the second-hand property market and helped out first-time buyers. So, but look, let's face it, there's still 30% of properties out there are bought by cash buyers in the current climate. So I think those cash buyers must be buying, a lot of them would be buying buy-to-lets for their pension. I'm seeing a lot personally, and I spoke to a couple yesterday who've got their house in Limerick City. They need a bigger house because of the kids, but they're going to let out their current house and then buy another house. And you can do that, and the lender, and you'll stay on your residential mortgage with the one that you're letting out, and then they become a landlord by default just because they want to keep one property, and they're keeping it because rents are sky high.
Do you think there are people in that position who do want to retain their previous home who are choosing not to let tenants in? They'd rather leave it vacant so as not to become landlords?
Not really, because well, you've still got a mortgage to pay in that scenario. I'm seeing very few vacant properties that they don't have, that they're not let out, apart from holiday homes, of course.
But that's a positive thing,
yeah,
then.
absolutely.
Okay, so we know something's working. When you arrived in Connemara this morning, you brought some good news. I've been harping on for quite a while on this show about the challenges that people trading down have. You know, those trading down who want, who might want to have something a little bit more manageable, but within their own communities, but maybe don't want to avail of any mortgage, but they're not able to navigate this selling and buying on the same day.
Yes.
And we've been calling for a really simple thing to counter that, would be a bridging product. And you told me today such a product now exists.
Yes, ICS, Dillisk Mortgages, based in Dublin, they brought out a bridging product for individuals now, and it's for that type of scenario. If you're selling one property but you found another one you want to buy, you bridge the product that you're selling, the property you're selling, and then you pay back that bridging. It's a short-term product, not the cheapest out there. It's there's fees to get into it, there's a fee to get out, and it's 1% a month. But if you've only got that money short-term and it relieves the stress, then it is out there to be had. That bridging product is also out there for people who want to buy properties at auction. And the unique feature about it, I guess, is it's now aimed at individuals, not companies. So there is still only one provider in Ireland, and bridging products, for instance, across the water in the UK, huge supply.
Yeah,
It's,
you would imagine it would solve so many of the simple logistical challenges that we have in terms of buying and selling a property, and that just add a layer of difficulty that might encourage or discourage people who might otherwise be encouraged to trade up or down. I'm glad you brought us into auction territory, because this is something that I feel like I've certainly been writing about it for 20 years. I feel like we've been discussing it regularly in the 6 years of this show. Every time, we don't say that mortgage buyers can't buy at auction, because we know technically the products exist, but actually there's still a lot of risk of buying at auction, and there's a lot of confusion and maybe misinformation. So as a mortgage broker, somebody comes to you, they want to buy a property at auction. Can you help them?
if they're a first-time buyer, we actively discourage them.
Okay.
Only because of the pitfalls involved, i.e. the timelines involved to get it over the line. And what I always remind people of when they're buying, there's a property at auction for a reason, and there's normally a defective title or something at the property. Now, if there's a defect in anything legal within the property, you will not be getting finance on it. And I do guide people. There should be a legal pack available before anybody bids at an auction, and it's getting their solicitor to go through that legal pack with a fine-tooth comb. Will there be a cost involved in that? Yes, there will. So buying at auction, if you're not successful, could be a very expensive hobby. It's in my opinion, not for first-time buyers, because the banks aren't geared up for people buying at auction. It's that's the issue, and it'd be down to title and things like that. So it's.
I fully accept that the banks aren't geared up.
Yeah.
I think that's a finance problem. I think that's a mortgage problem. That's the bank's problem. Whereas actually, I understand what you're saying around mortgages, and I think particularly in the days after the crash and in the early days of the recovery, that was certainly the perception. Because prior to kind of 20 years ago, or certainly 16, 17 years ago in Ireland, really the only properties that went to auction were those farms and very unique properties that, you know, you just didn't know who the market might be. Whereas actually, I can see an absolute trend towards mortgages as auctions as a preferred route of purchase. Are we moving? Is the market moving in a way that actually we're going to see properties coming for auction, not because there's any reason, just because the sellers want the speed, the certainty, the timeliness of an auction process?
The problem is you're in a perfect storm at the moment. If you put your property on the market in the morning with an auctioneer, it's going to go in record time now. It's and that's proven in the current climate. So is it a perfect time for auctions to become successful? I wouldn't have thought so, because if the property's sellable, it will go very quickly in the current climate. It's and it'll go above the price. And I guess the advantage of putting it through an auctioneer is you can say whether somebody can buy it at that price or not. At an auction, you'll set a ceiling on your property, and you might think you'll get more for it, but it might go for what you've put it that it might go for, or you'd be happy to accept for it. So I don't think your average person who's selling an individual, I don't think those people will ever get popular at selling at an auction, just because of the uncertainties in it. It's
do many first-time buyers come to you looking for them just because of the chronic undersupply across the market in all types and tenures of housing?
Oh, and I see them. We get inquiries weekly, possibly even daily. People who want to buy at auction, and believe it or not, we've got a template, an A4 template that we send out to those people to explain the do's and don'ts at an auction. Now, you put them on notice that if you put down your 10% deposit and you do not complete, we're not going to be held responsible because the bank doesn't like the property or there's a defect in the title. So you could lose your 10%. So normally at that point, the people come back and say, you know what, I'll go out and have a look around the marketplace and see if I can find a property through an auctioneer.
Have you been able to help any first-time buyers with buy at auction?
None.
Despite many inquiries?
Yeah, many inquiries, but...
Okay, that's an interesting one.
It's just the timelines involved in buying at an auction don't make it, in my opinion, doable for a first-time buyer.
You know, I think there are so many aspects of how we transact property in Ireland that if we were trying to achieve the same aim today, we just wouldn't do the same thing. And I think mortgages is an example of that. If we were trying to achieve the same aim, we just wouldn't design the processes that we have in place. And for some reason, the institutions, and by institutions, I don't just mean banking, I mean, you know, the Law Society and conveyancing and estate agents to a certain extent, and valuers, they're just so stuck in the way of this is how it's done that maybe nobody steps back to say, right, if we wanted to achieve the same aim today, how would we do that? And I don't believe it's any of our traditional mortgage, conveyancing and any of the process that we're using today. But again, that's an unfair question to hit you with today, Sean. So I won't put the entire dysfunctional market on your shoulders today.
It's getting better.
It is. Do you know what? It is getting better, and actually, supply would make it an awful lot better. You touched on it earlier. New developments coming to the market frees up supply.
Absolutely.
A couple of weeks ago, we were delighted to be in penthouse in the Docklands in Dublin that's been sold by Owen Riley.
Very nice.
Highest property currently on the market in Ireland. Beautiful, stunning property. If you've anybody in the market at 2 million, I would send them in Owen's direction. But it was really interesting because, you know, sometimes when somebody says something very sensible and you realise, actually, why aren't we paying more attention to this? And, you know, he talked about, because obviously Owen Riley as a company, they collect data and they share that with the marketplace, which 100%. We appreciate. And he was able to track that actually the lowest rate of rent increases was, very sensibly, as you would expect, in the area that saw the most supply. And yet we know from Hook and McDonald's most recent data that actually that supply has been choked. So essentially, the more supply that comes to the market, the better it is for people in rental and those who want to buy. And yet our government are still doing these little populist kind of soften around the edges to try help buyers instead of doing the thing that would actually contribute. You're based in Limerick. I know you work nationwide. You're based in Limerick. How is the Limerick marketplace faring in terms of supply for new or second-hand homes?
It's poor. New builds have certainly helped, and there's been a lot of building going on around the Raheen area, out in Mungret, Castletry. But then the prices now are, everything is going above asking. And people accept that now, and it is being driven, especially the new build market. It's been driven. People can still avail of the Help to Buy, which I've got no doubt will push prices up. Green mortgages, so the rates are very good. And a typical example, you could have two teachers now who've been in the job a couple of years, secondary school teachers, that their borrowing power could be 450. So, and then you think about it, so they're buying a house of 550. So it is, and you're not getting a lot in the Castletry area of Limerick. You won't get anything less than 500,000, which is expensive now. It's
no, it absolutely is. And in fact, one of the trends we've seen in recent years is that couples who are both working professionally and don't have children have such a huge advantage over single people, or those who maybe only one is working, or who have children, because actually children are quite a liability to the mortgage application.
Absolutely.
And has that improved any? Because that seems such an inhumane way to help people negotiate their way to a home.
No, lenders still dislike children. It's and that's the only way to put it. If you came to me as a first-time buyer couple and you wanted a plan for your life, I'd say, look, get your mortgage before you have your kids, and that's just how it is. They attribute a huge amount of expense to a child, and even if you're paying childcare costs, then they'll add that on top of what they deem a child should cost. So people think they might be able to get 4 times income. If you throw 3 kids into the pot, you might not be getting your 4 times income. So you might be getting a lot less on your mortgage than you think. But it is down to, they put 5 people in a household, and what does 5 people in a household cost? And yes, kids are expensive, but it's nightmare.
Well, I can only say, as the owner of a Chihuahua, I can say Chihuahuas are expensive as well, but I wouldn't like my Daisy considered on a mortgage application. The last time we spoke, Sean, you told us a little glimmer of hope, because we've been reporting on the mortgage market in Ireland contracting, which is contrary to trends across Europe and in the UK. So first of all, is our mortgage market continuing to contract? Or you had, the last time we spoke about NUA money, and that was coming into the market. Is it in? Is it established? Is it functioning?
They finally got there. You had Moco, who came to the market in late 2024. They're owned by an Austrian bank, and now you have NUA Money, who've come to the market there in late summer. Now these lenders are really forward thinking, and that's where the market gets a little bit confusing. I.e., NUA Money. There's a big thing I've always spoken about when I do webinars and so on, is something called proven repayment ability. That means that, are you paying something today that will finish when you take out your mortgage? That's the equivalent to your monthly payment, i.e., are you saving, are you paying rent? NUA Money, believe it or not, you don't have to have any proven repayment ability to get a mortgage. So it clearly isn't the central bank rule, but lenders are actively turning people down on mortgages because they can't prove that they're paying something today that will finish when they're, but NUA Money do. NUA Money is a computer-based online system. It sounded too good to be true when they said what they were bringing to the market.
As you say this, in fact, that's raising really red flags for me, that they don't want to look at proven repayment capacity, because we definitely don't want to go back to a time when mortgages are given irresponsibly.
No, and they still stick to the rules of times income, but they will look at, are you a good bet for in the future for income? And we put an application into them last week. The application within it 10 o'clock in the morning, we had a mortgage offer, not an approval in principle, we had a mortgage offer by 10 to 12 the same morning.
How is that possible?
Because of their systems. They've bucked the trend. They're doing what you could do in the UK for years. And they've MoCo equally. You'll get a mortgage offer within a couple of days. Avant Money, you'll get a mortgage offer within a couple of days. It seems to be the pillar banks who, you mentioned buying at auction. If you're buying at auction, I took you to, I won't mention who it was, but a particular pillar bank on the high street, they were taking over 5 weeks to give you an approval. And then you have to go and get your valuation done. And then you have to wait for your mortgage offer. You'd be 7 weeks in the process before you even knew you had a mortgage offer.
Well, that takes you outside of your
Absolutely.
auction process
Yeah.
anyway. But again, that's not a problem with the auction process. That's a problem with the bank.
Absolutely. And the banks are stuck, the pillar banks are stuck in the old ages. It's yes, they are going online more now, but up until recently, if we were putting an application into AIB, we had to literally post the file into them, whereas now we can do it online, thankfully. So it's they're getting better. But these new lenders, it's 2 hours for a mortgage offer is incredible.
Tell me then about how buyers are reacting to that. So, and we can segment it here if you want, but say in terms of first-time buyers, are they happy to do everything online? Are they coming to you prepared? Is it taking you long to get your buyers shipshape and ready for application?
When I first looked at an online process 4 years ago, I was thinking, look, this will never work. It's not everybody will upload PDFs. We as a business are 99% paperless. Everybody does everything online, and everything is uploaded online. And the majority of our applications that go into a lender is done online now. So it's the only way forward, and it cuts down so much time, and it means people are getting it right first time. So if you are in a hurry to get a mortgage offer, at least everything goes into the lender, and your approval pops out, and then your offer pops out when you find a property. So it's
and are the buyers keeping pace with this? Are they coming to you prepared and ready?
Absolutely. People realise now that, especially switching, you have to be. You can do a switch in 4 weeks, so from start to finish, if you have a good solicitor. And again, there are now in Ireland solicitors popping up that just do conveyancing, and they're very good at it, and they know what to do when somebody's switching, so they can get it over the line. So all this is important. We're finally coming up in the ranks where we should be in Europe, helping people along at a timely pace.
Do you think now the fact that exists in Ireland, it will speed the pillar banks up?
100%. And the pillar banks are looking at their own online now. PTSB have recently done online, and you see it on TV advertising it. Bank of Ireland, the broker part of it, is all done online now, and they are getting better. Look, and we couldn't do without them. But let's not forget, we've got 3 pillar banks in Ireland. KBC are gone, Ulster Bank are gone. Will we have another pillar bank coming into the country? I doubt it. Revolut are talking about coming into the market next year, which will be very interesting. We'll see how that pans out, because they're super quick.
Yeah. I'm conscious now we're really kind of running low on time, but you touched on it earlier around the leadership, the government now that we hope to have in place as soon as possible. Hopefully it won't take them the same length of time it took them the first time around to negotiate the programme for government, but hopefully we will have our new government in place shortly. But knowing that, while we don't know the final outcome, we've an idea of the makeup. What are you expecting for 2025? Is the trends for first-time buyers, do you expect that to continue?
I do. I expect the switcher market to pick up some pace, only because the way the rates are coming down. There is a bit of great news for the consumer out there at the moment. There is a bit of a rate battle going on. AIB reduced their rates there about 4 to 6 weeks ago. Bank of Ireland followed, and now Bank of Ireland, they're very competitive with them. My bet money would be that PTSB will follow early in the new year. And we had a surprise yesterday. MoCo reduced their rates by 0.25%. So there is movement in the market, and I see that continuing next year. Now, will we ever see a rate of 1.95 again we had back 3 or 4 years ago? I don't think so. But money is good value at the moment. When you look at the last 15 years, the average mortgage rate has panned out about 7%. You can get money now at between 3 and 4%, so it's good value.
And do you expect that to continue throughout 2025 and maybe into 2026?
I do. I expect that the ECB will have further rate cuts. I do think it will peak next year. There'll probably be another 0.25 this side of Christmas, and then another 1%, I would imagine, next year. So anybody on a tracker rate, there's good news coming. But will you be back down to zero and had a good run at it for however many years? I doubt it. But yeah, I do see rates coming down. But look, we're in a crazy world at the moment. So if I was asked there before, fixed or variable rate, I'd be fixing my money at the moment if I was taking out a first mortgage certainly for the next 3 to 5 years, because who knows what's coming down the track. We've had COVID, we've had Russia, Ukraine, we've got things going on in Syria. Who knows?
Since you and I first sat down on this show, a lot has changed over the past 6 years. Before we finish up, without oversharing, you've just recently gone through the process of moving into moving homes, and has that given you, and maybe, you know, because you've been a mortgage broker for so long, having to be back in the marketplace yourself, has that given you a new level of empathy with your applicants?
It certainly has. It was finding a property was the challenge to begin with, and then the controlling the sale. People told me what I wanted to do couldn't be done.
What did you want to do?
I wanted to sell 2 houses and buy a bigger house, and I wanted to do it all in the same day.
So you needed 2 homes to close.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your purchase to go through all in one day.
Yeah.
Was it at least one solicitor dealing with all that?
There was my solicitor, and then there was the solicitor for the people we were buying off, and then there was 2 solicitors dealing off the 2 purchasers for the 2 I was selling. So you had 4 lots of solicitors.
And were they all on board with this?
Oh, they all told me,
couldn't be done.
including the auctioneer, told me this is impossible. We've never done it. We completed in the morning on the 2 sales, and completed on the purchase in the afternoon, all on a Friday, because I like to move on a Friday. I'd taken the bold step of actually booking a removal firm, and they moved me as well. So I've worked in the UK for many years on mortgages. Yeah. That's the norm. It's over here. It seemed to be, people were horrified that I was even thinking of doing such a bold move. But
if someone came into you and said, I want to sell 2 properties and buy one and do it all in the same day, would you tell them it could be done?
I'd say, hallelujah, I'll help you with that.
The way you would now. Well, all I can think of is my early days in conveyancing. First of all, you temper expectations. In fact, the way you temper expectations is by saying, don't book your removal truck. Yeah. And the trick most solicitors, conveyancing solicitors, will build in is never have it on a Friday. Because if you have a closing schedule for a Friday, everybody has the in-laws ready to clear out the place on a Saturday morning, and they've got their kind of first home dinner expected on the Saturday night. So even if it goes to the Monday, they'll be disappointed. Yeah. So actually, I can't believe all 4 solicitors agreed to that. I would have expected a closing on a Monday, and then you have some chance.
Oh, they were all telling me that. Look, there might be a few days in it. And I've had people purchase in the past where they've moved into a property, but the money hasn't changed hands for another week. All this sort of bumper stuff.
I don't think there's much of that happening anymore.
Not anymore. No, there's crazy stuff out there.
Times have changed. So for people, let's just kind of get specific for people who are looking to buy their first home or trade up or down in 2025. Notwithstanding the challenges of the local marketplace, you can't make supply happen. We're doing our best. Yeah. In terms of mortgage market, what are your best tips for them to get them ready for the marketplace?
That is the biggest tip. Make sure you're ready. Because although we've got newer money who don't need proven repayment ability, go in and get advice from a broker who's got access to the whole market as to, are you mortgage ready yet? I meet a number of people, and when I assess their situation, I said, look, you need to do X, Y, and Z over the next 3 months, and then we'll put in your application, because there's no point in putting in an application if it's not going to be successful. So the real tip is, read up on it, see what's out there in the marketplace to get you on the property market, because with Help to Buy out there, with shared equity, there is ways of people getting on the market that they might not be familiar with it. So everybody should look up the First Home Scheme. Everybody should look up what grants are out there. Now, derelict home grant is another conversation for another day. It is out there, but you need the money before. The Help to Buy, no doubt, will be extended and has been extended now, and won't be done away with, because Sinn Féin doesn't look like they're getting in. So there is lots of help out there, but the trick is get somebody who's good at it, who does it every day, to give you advice.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. And I'm going to add one more thing to that. Maybe head over to the Housing for All or the Housing Department's website, because there's a huge amount of information and resources there for buyers. And actually there are more grants than you realise, and there are more initiatives. And actually there have been some changes and tweaks to some of those schemes over the last 2 years to encourage take-up. So I definitely recommend people do that. Sean, thank you so much for joining us and being the first Property Roundup guest to record in studio here in the heart of Connemara. I'm delighted. So thank you so much for joining us today. That was Sean Corbett, SYS Mortgages. My thanks as always to producer Katie Tallon and to Hear Me Roar Media on sound. And finally, thank you indeed for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Property Roundup here on iPropertyRadio. In the meantime, please be sure to check out all of the other construction and real estate shows here on iPropertyRadio.com.